Welcome to the Faces podcast. We're a Christian and Muslim charity working to build resilience in faith communities against child sexual exploitation and other forms of harm. We'll be talking about what faith and interfaith work means to us and how we embed an inclusive and authentic approach throughout our work.
Today we're sitting with Tony Thompson, one of the founders of Faces and also the leader of Hope Church Luton. And myself, Nigel, who works for Faces, and Melissa, who works for Faces and run this podcast together, we'll be asking Tony some questions about some of the beginnings of things and some of what Hope Church brings to the scene here locally in Luton. So, Tony, you grew up in Luton and lived here till the age of
18.
Okay, and then went off to university.
That's right.
Lived a life in various other places, and then came back to Luton
Yes.
to start a church.
That's correct. Yeah. So I'm born and bred in Luton, and have certainly for 2 or 3 generations lived in Luton. My dad was at Vauxhall. My grandfather was at Vauxhall. My mum was a machinist. I went to a local school and wasn't a person of faith, and one of the things I say, I knew the pubs around Luton, even though I was underage, much better than I knew the churches. Was the first member of my family to go to university, and it was a formative time. But whilst at university, I started arguing with Christians to prove them wrong. And to my shock and horror, came to the conclusion that they were right and I was wrong. And my first ever prayer was, "All right, God, I give in," which I now subsequently know is not the most theologically sound prayer, but I think God listened to it, and I then had to discover what it meant to live a life following Jesus. And long story short, got involved in leadership within churches and had a desire for people without faith, people like me, to help them discover faith, and realizing that there was a whole group of people, a whole generation who didn't know faith, and the church wasn't reaching out to them. And so had that desire for the church to be not just for those who brought up in church, but for those who are outside it. And so came to Luton with a view to doing that, and did that 20 years ago. Found that was much easier to say than to do, and it took me and others who were with me a long while for the church to really be something that I felt comfortable with. Because it's one thing doing that in a white middle class area, but in a town like Luton, what does it mean to be a church, a faith community that is relevant to those who don't have faith? And so it took me a long, long while to even know what that looked like, and let alone for it to be like that. But I'm really pleased to say I feel very, very comfortable with how Hope Church is now. But it took a long while to get there. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, but at last it's the sort of church that I feel really pleased to be part of.
That's such a deep reminder of, when setting up a church or an equivalent organization, it's not about just serving the people that are already there, but it's much more about reaching those who aren't there with you yet. So you said, you're comfortable where Hope Church is now in how you do that. So what are some of the ways that you do that now?
Well, I think we are in numbers of different ways seeking to serve the community and demonstrating that faith has a role to play. So for example, way back, which you were involved in, Melissa, under a different guise, we've been involved in the local community in terms of Hightown for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, is it? In terms of employing and a Hightown community worker seeking to serve the community. That's taken a numbers of different guises. Currently, we're supporting, I'm involved with Edible Hightown, which is morphed into that, but serves the Hightown community. There's the involvement with Faces. There's we're a centre for numbers of different groups. Autism Beds is based here. Numbers of different people working with mental health charities that they're gathering here. Going on today in the building is one of our language schools. We have over 50 students, most of them refugees at different levels. We offer free language school for them to help them improve their English. So if anyone listens to this and think, great, I'll come. We're at the moment fully subscribed, but they can go on the waiting list. We run a community drop-in with a light lunch, which serves different people. Different. It's always difficult to know what phrase to use, but different needy people, different people who we can serve and help. Our Sundays are multicultural, lots of different people, numbers of refugees, numbers of people from broken backgrounds. We have a second service, 4:00, which is exclusively for people who are not used to coming to church. It's just a mirage of different ways that have evolved over the time. And I forget a lot of the stuff that we're doing, but serving the community as a whole, helping them in terms of faith, but not exclusively in terms of faith, of trying to help people holistically, but that includes faith.
Yeah. Some of the work I've done in the community, I came across a lady from a Muslim background who, when I mentioned Hope Church Luton, she said, "That is my favourite church in Luton." And I thought that's a lovely statement to hear from people from other faiths. And just wondering, how does someone who's a church leader like yourself and a church as active in Luton as that get involved with something like Faces and work, multi-faith work into a tough area like child protection and safeguarding and all of that?
Well, I think the starting point, which I've come to, is of honouring and respecting everyone for all their backgrounds, whatever social or ethnic background, but including faith. So I am open, and my Muslim friends are open, that I want them to become Christians, and they are open that they want me to become a Muslim. And I think that's a good place to start. When I don't believe that all faiths are the same, but I respect people of faith. And I've talked in other podcasts about secularism is a faith in itself. And so most people are people of faith, and we need to respect that. And I have learned a lot from my Muslim friends about their faith and the way they outwork it. And I respect that and I honour that. And I think that's the heart of what we do in terms of Faces. Sometimes people can be fearful of people from other faiths. I found there's nothing to be fearful about at all, and that people of active faith, Muslims, Christians and others, there are so much that we have in common, and there's a joint desire to serve the community and bring good to the community. And Faces is one of the ways that is happening. And through doing activities together, important activities like Faces, it builds and strengthens the relationships across faiths, which I think is great. So do you want me to talk about why Faces in particular? I feel a bit of a charlatan in terms of this, but I suffer from imposter syndrome. So I got involved through the back door through other Christian friends who were aware of the issues, and I just happened to be meeting with them and some others when the topic came up about issues of grooming and child sexual exploitation, and I didn't have a particular burden or a different understanding of the issue, but found as we were meeting together, one, the benefits of working cross faith and working with Muslims, I enjoyed that. But I also realized that everybody else was so impacted and involved in it all that they needed someone like me from the outside just to summarize and bring clarity and organize things in the early days in terms of having clear objectives and saying, yeah, these are the issues, but what are we going to do about it? And so I found myself contributing in that sort of way, which has carried on. And I'm just honoured and pleased that I can make a little contribution in this area.
And I suppose in talking about safeguarding and what, Faces is about from that point, being a hub of the community as Hope Church is and having all of these activities going on, safeguarding is obviously going to be a strong focus throughout, being able to enable those activities and make sure that things are done safely and things aren't, abuse and concerns of abuse and all of those things are addressed in the right way. And I suppose as Faces, one of the main things we try to reiterate is that faith isn't a risk. It is something that's actually a strength when it comes to safeguarding. And being a church leader, that obviously comes with a deeper understanding than perhaps another person around what that means as a Christian and about their responsibility as a Christian to make sure people are safe. And I won't speak for you, but maybe speaking into that a little bit would be useful.
Yeah, I think so. I think as part of what Faces does is to help faith communities to understand that faith is part of the answer, but also we need to make sure that our places of interaction are safe for people. And so because I'm involved in Faces, I can bring and use their material and their insights, put it into practice here. It also, as a church leader, I come into contact regularly with victims of this, and we run a course, a group to help victims who are now as adults who have suffered child abuse as children in their different forms, and using faith as a means of healing, because both Muslims and Christians believe that there is healing available through God, and it's my leading of a church has been helped no end by being involved with Faces, both in terms of knowledge and resources and things that can be applied locally. And the fact that I'm a local church leader means I do then have something to contribute to the wider group.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier on when we were talking about the multi-faith aspect, the fact that you would love to see people become Christians and your friends would love to see you become Muslim and all the rest of it. But that shows something of a healthy balance. It means that the people, you're secure in your faith and you're working with people who are secure in their faith. And that security means that things are not on a threatened basis or are frightened, people are scared of anything. So as a result, you can have proper conversations. And I'm guessing from that stable base, which is underpins Faces, are there lessons that people may be listening in other parts of the UK or around the world do you think have to learn from some of the lessons you've learned over the years? Because it's about 6 years into Faces, isn't it? So thereabouts. So I'm just sort of thinking, are there lessons you've learned that you think would be useful in other settings?
Well, they're lessons that I've learned, but I'm not imposing them on anybody else. But I believe that we need to be upfront about things. And certainly one of the things that my Muslim friends tell me is how they struggle with Christians who they feel are not being honest, that they get involved in things claiming to do it just for good deeds, but actually behind it are just trying to make everyone to be Christians, and they're not upfront about their motivation. And therefore, I think that as Christians, it's appropriate for us to be honest and upfront, and that we didn't ought to be sort of peddlers of the gospel. We didn't ought to be undermining things. We need to be honest and straightforward. And I have found personally that being straightforward like that, people respect it, and it means that there's not an elephant in the room. We're there, and in all honesty, I've always said, because I wasn't born a Christian in the sense I became one because I felt it was true, and that I need to work for myself with that sense of integrity. If I'm wrong and Islam is the truth and Christianity isn't, it's much better to find that out now than when I get to the pearly gates and I suddenly find that my whole life has been lived on something that's not true. And so not to go into that type of discussions with being open, it seems daft to me. And so there's a sense in which I'm secure, but I'm also open enough to know that I'm a truth seeker, and I believe I've discovered the truth in Christianity, but I'm also aware that others feel that they've discovered the truth in other ways. And so it makes common sense to be open and honest about those things and to enter into relationships, to my mind, with integrity.
So much food for thought there. It occurred to me as we're talking about all these things that we're talking about it from our perspective, as people engaging with other people. So we said we are secure in our faith, but actually those we engage with might not be as secure in their faith. They might not have faith. And I think what you said about that honesty of intentions and that honesty of why we are providing certain support or providing certain activities, and the honesty of really wanting people to find religion within that is especially true for people who might come from backgrounds that aren't as diverse, aren't as cohesively multi-faith working as Luton is in a lot of ways. And just to illustrate that, I was in a church the other day with a different hat on, running a different project and support. And we had a lot of people who had recently come from other countries, and so were used to a much different dynamic and culture and everything. And me being in the church, wearing hijab, visibly Muslim, a gentleman said to one of my colleagues that, I can't believe it. I can't believe that, in my country, you would never see a Muslim in a church, a woman wearing hijab in a church. And not just in the church, as doing something else, but as an organizer, actually coordinating something in the church. So that idea of Muslims and Christians working together really just wasn't there. Especially, a church hosting Muslim, an activity that a Muslim is running in its simplest form. And it was so interesting, for the kind of joy and surprise that was coming with that realization, but also, I suppose, as a consideration of how that could be perceived as well, because we wouldn't want to see it as a watering down of either faith's values and standpoints. And I suppose it's just an important thing to note is that for us, we've worked together for many years, and we know what Christian and Muslims working together in Luton is about, and kind of the things to be alive to, and where people's intentions are. But for other people who come from different backgrounds and perhaps don't see this, running in the same way, there might be a lot of other questions that it brings up too. So I suppose it's something that we can maybe discuss more at another point.
I totally agree. And it happens, you can talk about how people feel within the Muslim community, but in the Christian community, there's not everybody agrees with me in terms of my attitude, in terms of it all. And so the fact that I feel very comfortable of being in mosques and honouring that, and I have been to Friday prayers and valued that experience, and don't feel fearful of it. But I know there are some Christians who question my attitude towards that. But yeah, similarly, I've had some of my Muslim friends sharing on a Sunday morning within our worship context. They don't preach, but I think it's really healthy for my congregation to hear and understand the challenges of being a Muslim in Luton today. And a number of our friends have done that, and it's been sort of valuable for people to hear. So and regularly there are Muslims in our building, both people coming to meet with me and friends, but also sort of Muslim groups who are used in the building, and it's just great to be able to work together and demonstrate something together.
Yeah, and I think that openness is incredibly powerful and builds security into people. And so we've had a very good conversation. Thank you both, and thank you, Tony, for all you bring to Faces as a co-chair and all you bring to Luton as well.
Pleasure. It's good to be able to chat, and it's lovely working with the two of you.